Welcome to another deep dive. This time, it looks like we're really getting into the weeds with persuasion.
Yeah, Persuasion.
You send in so much great stuff.
You did, yeah.
It looks like you've been reading Age of Propaganda.
Yes.
And then also, you know, articles on fear appeals, subliminal messages,
Right.
inoculation theory.
Inoculation theory, that's a good one.
And you even threw in some historical figures like Hitler and Lincoln.
Yes.
C. Everett Koop, the Surgeon General.
Oh, yeah, the Surgeon General, yeah.
So it seems like you're really interested in understanding not just like how we're persuaded,
Yeah.
but also
Yeah.
where the line blurs between ethical influence and just like straight up manipulation.
Well, when you think about it, it's a really rich landscape that you're exploring because, think about it. We are bombarded with messages.
We are. I was reading that some researchers believe we encounter over 5,000 ads every single day.
Every single day. It's absolutely true.
No wonder it feels like we're just constantly being like bombarded with messages.
Well, it is a message-saturated environment. And so, one of the things that's fascinating about it is that it changes the game, I think, for both the persuader and the person being persuaded.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, there's this constant...
Like developing mental defenses without even realizing it.
I think we are, in a way. Think about it this way. When it comes to persuasion, sometimes our brains take the highway, We carefully consider the arguments. We weigh the evidence.
Right.
We think about the pros and cons.
Yeah.
But let's be honest. Most of the time, we're taking the scenic route.
Okay. Okay.
We're swayed by things like catchy jingles,
Oh, right.
celebrity endorsements, or even just, the sheer repetition of a message.
Yeah.
And that's what researchers call the peripheral route to persuasion,
Okay.
where those subtle cues can really kind of sneak in.
It's almost like we're on autopilot sometimes. And those peripheral cues just slip right past our radar.
Absolutely. And that's why it's so important, I think, to understand these techniques. It's not about becoming cynical or suspicious of everything.
Right.
But it is about becoming more aware of how we're being influenced, even when we don't realize it.
Right. So let's talk about how that influence actually plays out. One of the sources that you sent in pointed out that persuasion doesn't always start with like a direct argument.
Right.
There's this whole idea of pre-persuasion,
Yes.
which I guess basically means setting the stage before the curtain even goes up.
You got it. Think of it as framing the conversation before it even begins.
Okay.
Okay. The words that we choose,
Yeah.
the labels that we use,
Okay.
the questions that we ask, all of these things subtly shape how we perceive an issue,
Right.
even if we don't realize it.
Yeah, it's like that classic example of a glass half full versus half empty.
There you go. Exactly.
Same amount of liquid.
Right.
But the way it's framed
Exactly.
changes our whole
Perception.
100%. And you know
What about Lincoln's Gettysburg Address? He didn't just give a speech, he reframed the entire Civil War.
Yeah.
He shifted the focus from rebellion to rebirth.
Exactly. Think
Yeah.
about that. He used language to evoke unity and purpose.
Right.
And that influenced how people perceived the conflict itself, which, I think is a stark contrast to how some figures, use loaded language to demonize their opponents and turn a debate into a battle of, us versus them.
Right. Right. Yeah, and it's not just words that have this power, right?
Right.
We're also incredibly influenced by images and stories.
Absolutely. Our brains are wired to be more engaged by visuals and narratives
Right.
than abstract facts.
So true. Think about the difference between a news story that presents a crime as an isolated incident versus one that frames it as part of a larger trend,
Exactly.
complete with dramatic footage and personal accounts.
Right. And the way that it's presented through images, storytelling, that can dramatically impact how we perceive the issue. And those perceptions can have real-world consequences, right?
Well, absolutely.
Like I was reading about the leaflet of Villejuif, this fake list of cancer-causing food additives
Oh, wow.
that spread like wildfire in France.
Really?
Even though it was completely made up, people panicked. The power of a vivid, emotionally charged story, even a false one,
Yes.
it's incredible.
It's incredible, isn't it? And it really highlights, I think, the importance of critical thinking and fact-checking.
Yeah.
Don't just accept things at face value, especially when they tap into your existing fears or prejudices. It's so easy to get swept up in a compelling narrative,
Totally.
especially when it plays on our emotions.
Right. Speaking of getting swept up, let's talk about something we can all relate to. The allure of scarcity. I don't know about you, but I always seem to want something more when I know it's hard to get,
Yeah.
like when there's only a few left.
It's a fundamental psychological principle, Scarcity, whether real or perceived, can make us act irrationally. It really can.
Yeah.
It's almost like our brains are wired to crave
Right.
what's in limited supply.
Like those one-day-only sales.
Ah,
Or the frenzy around limited edition sneakers.
exactly.
We're practically programmed to want what we think we can't have.
That's right.
It makes me think of those going out of business sales that seem to last forever.
Right.
Are they actually going out of business?
Yeah. Yeah.
Or is that just a clever way to create a sense of urgency?
I think oftentimes it is. Yeah, yeah. It's a great question.
Sometimes I wonder.
And that's precisely why I think understanding these techniques is so important. Again, it's not about becoming cynical or distrusting, everyone who offers us a free pen or whatever.
Right.
But it is about being more aware of how our decisions are being influenced.
It's like having a secret decoder ring for the world of persuasion.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've talked about scarcity, framing, and the power of storytelling.
Mm-hmm.
What other tricks of the trade should we be aware of?
Oh, there's so many. Well, one of the things that we should probably talk about is the messenger themselves.
Oh, okay.
Aristotle, long before billboards and jingles,
Right.
he said that the character of the speaker was essential to persuasion.
Great.
And you know what? Modern research actually backs him up.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, we're simply more likely to be swayed by someone that we see as credible.
This is not just about the message, it's about who's delivering it.
Absolutely. But here's where it gets a little tricky.
All right.
You see, that sense of credibility can be manufactured.
All right.
It's not always genuine expertise. It's the perception of expertise that can be very carefully crafted.
Oh, yeah, you see that all the time. Like those ads with actors in lab coats pushing some new medication.
There you go. Exactly.
Are they actual doctors?
Right.
Probably not.
Probably not.
But that association with authority can be so powerful.
Absolutely.
I wonder if that works on me.
Well,
Do you think I'm easily swayed by that kind of thing?
It's not about being easily swayed.
Okay.
I think it's about recognizing those mental shortcuts that our brains tend to take.
Right. Okay.
We see someone in a position of authority and we just automatically assume they know what they're talking about. But it's worth pausing to consider, are they truly an expert? Or are they just playing the part?
So how do we tell the difference between like real credibility and the manufactured kind? Especially when we're just like bombarded with so many messages every day.
Well, one way to do that is to look for conflicts of interest.
Okay.
If someone stands to gain financially from what they're promoting, I think it's fair to say that their credibility should be scrutinized more carefully.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
So are they truly passionate about this product or idea?
Yeah.
Or are they just in it for the paycheck?
Right, exactly.
Okay. And what about attractiveness? It seems like we're constantly being sold things by beautiful people. Does that really work?
Yeah.
Do we really buy things just because a celebrity we like is endorsing them?
Well, I think we all like to think we're above that.
Yeah.
But, research actually suggests it's still incredibly effective.
Really?
Even when we know it's happening, especially when we're tired, when we're distracted.
Right.
Remember that scenic route to persuasion we were talking about?
Yeah.
That's when those superficial cues can really slip in.
So basically, when we're not paying close attention,
Yeah.
we're more likely to be swayed by a pretty face.
I think that's a fair statement. Yeah.
Good to know.
Yes.
Okay, so we've got credibility and attractiveness. What about like the emotional side of things?
Well, emotions play a huge role in persuasion.
Okay.
Fear, for example, can be a very powerful motivator.
Right.
But using it ethically is tricky.
Okay.
Research suggests that moderate levels of fear, coupled with a clear course of action,
Okay.
can be effective in changing behavior.
So it's not just about scaring people. It's about giving them a way to address the problem, like those public service announcements that show the dangers of drunk driving, but then also tell you to call a cab or designated driver.
Absolutely. You need to give people a sense of agency,
Okay.
a way to take action. Otherwise, they might just shut down
Right.
and ignore the message altogether.
Right. And without that action step, fear can backfire, right?
Yes.
It can create
Yeah.
more anxiety than actual change.
Right.
It's like those fear-mongering tactics you see in some political campaigns.
Right.
They whip up this frenzy of fear,
Right.
but they don't always offer realistic solutions.
Yeah, that's a perfect example, I think, of how fear can be misused.
Right.
And it really underscores the importance of being able to recognize the difference between, legitimate warnings
Yeah.
and manipulative tactics.
That's like we're building up our persuasion immunity,
Yes,
so we don't get infected by those bad messages.
that's a great way to put it.
Speaking of social dynamics, some of our sources talked about the power of belonging
Right.
and how that can influence our choices.
Yes.
There's this term, granfalloon, that really caught my eye.
Oh, yeah.
It describes those groups that we identify with,
Uh-huh.
even if the common ground is totally random.
Yeah. It's fascinating, isn't it?
It is.
We humans crave connection,
We do.
and that desire to belong can make us more susceptible, I think, to persuasion.
Yeah.
It's like we're wired to be influenced by those that we see as part of our tribe.
Like those us versus them dynamics you see everywhere,
Yes.
from sports rivalries to
Yeah.
political debates.
Exactly.
It's almost like our brains are saying, well, if my group believes it, it must be true.
Yeah, that's a great point. And those appeals to group identity, can be incredibly powerful.
They can.
Think about, the surge of patriotism that we often see after national tragedies. That sense of shared identity can be, unifying
Right.
and inspiring.
But it's a double-edged sword, right?
It is.
Because that same group mentality can be used to
Mm.
manipulate and divide people.
100%. And that's where critical thinking comes in.
Right.
Just because a message appeals to our group identity doesn't mean that it's automatically true
Right.
or ethical.
Right.
We always need to step back and analyze the message itself, not just our gut reaction to it.
Okay, so belonging is a powerful force. What about guilt?
Guilt.
That's got to be a major player in the persuasion game.
Oh, guilt is a heavy hitter for sure.
It is.
Especially when it's tied to our sense of self-worth.
Right.
We want to see ourselves as good people.
Right.
And guilt can be a really powerful motivator to act in ways that align with that self-image.
Yeah, you see it all the time, right?
Yes.
Those charitable appeals with images of starving children.
Yes.
Those commercials that make you feel bad for not calling your mom enough. It's like they're pushing our emotional buttons to get us to comply.
And you know what? It can be very effective.
Yeah.
Marketers, fundraisers, they know that guilt can drive donations, sales, even changes in behavior.
But like with fear, there's a fine line, right?
There is.
Between ethical persuasion and manipulation.
Yeah.
Like if the guilt trip is based on false or misleading information,
Right.
that's crossing the line.
That's right. I think it's about respecting the audience.
Right.
And appealing to their better nature, not exploiting their vulnerabilities.
Right.
Think about, those accusations of liberal guilt or white guilt.
Right.
They're not really appeals to genuine guilt.
Right.
It's more about, shaming
Right.
or silencing opposing viewpoints. That's not persuasion.
Yeah.
That's manipulation.
Okay, so it sounds like the key is to be aware of our own emotional responses
Yes.
and ask ourselves, is this genuine guilt that I'm feeling?
Yeah.
Or am I being played?
Right. That's a great question to ask yourself.
It's about being mindful of the emotional dynamics that are at play.
Yeah.
And making sure we're making decisions based on, our own values.
Right.
Not just reacting to someone else's persuasive tactics.
Okay, we've covered guilt. What about that age-old principle of you scratch my back, I'll scratch yours?
Oh, yeah.
That's got to be a persuasion classic.
Oh, it is. You're talking about reciprocity.
Yeah.
And you're absolutely right. It's a social norm that is so deeply ingrained
Right.
in human interaction.
Mm-hmm.
We feel obligated to return favors, even if we didn't ask for them in the first place.
Right.
And yes, persuaders know how to exploit that tendency.
Like those free gifts you get in the mail. Or those complimentary samples at the grocery store.
Yes, exactly.
Are they just being nice, or is there a hidden agenda?
Well, they might seem like acts of generosity, but they're often cleverly designed to trigger those feelings of obligation.
It's like when a car salesman offers you a free cup of coffee while you're browsing.
It seems like a small gesture, but could that make you feel more inclined to buy from them?
It certainly could.
Interesting.
Or consider, those charities that send you personalized address labels
Right.
or calendars with their donation requests.
Right.
You might not even want those things.
Right.
But you feel obligated to reciprocate
Uh-huh.
their gift
Yeah.
with a donation.
So it's like they're playing a long game.
Yeah.
They're using small gestures
Yes,
to build up to like a bigger ask.
exactly. And that's why I think understanding these tactics is so important.
Yeah.
again, it's not about becoming cynical or distrusting everyone who offers us a free pen.
Right.
But it is about being aware of the psychological dynamics at play.
Right.
And making sure that we're making decisions based on our own values and needs,
right.
not just reacting to someone else's persuasive tactics.
Right. It's like we're learning the rules of the game so we can play it smarter. Okay, so we've got reciprocity. What other persuasive plays are out there?
There's another one kind of related to reciprocity where someone gets you to agree to a small thing
Okay.
and then uses that to persuade you to do more. It's called commitment and consistency.
Oh, commitment and consistency.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It basically plays on our desire to appear consistent.
Okay.
So once we've committed to something,
Yeah.
even something small,
Right.
we're more likely to go along with larger requests that sort of align with that initial commitment.
Also, like if you get someone to sign a petition,
Yeah,
they're more likely to donate to the cause later,
exactly.
even if they weren't really that passionate about it at the beginning.
Exactly. Or think about how some groups recruit new members.
Okay.
They might start with a small request,
Right.
like attending a free meeting or something,
Yeah.
and then they gradually escalate the level of involvement,
Oh, okay.
leading to, bigger commitments like donating time or money.
Wow, it's like they're slowly reeling you in.
They are.
I guess the lesson here is to be mindful of those small commitments, right?
Yes.
They might seem insignificant at the time,
Right.
but they can set the stage for much bigger decisions down the road.
Absolutely. Being aware of that principle of commitment and consistency can really help us avoid getting swept up in something that maybe we don't fully support.
Right. Okay. So we've got to watch out for those seemingly small commitments.
Mm.
What else should we be on the lookout for?
Well, I think one thing that often gets overlooked is the power of language itself.
Okay.
The words we choose,
Yeah.
the way we phrase things, can have a huge impact on how a message is received.
One of the sources that you sent in mentioned Ronald Reagan as being like a master of this.
Oh, yeah.
They said he could paint these pictures with his words, making even complex policies feel relatable and engaging.
He was a brilliant storyteller. He really was. And he understood that people connect with narratives, with vivid language that evokes emotion.
Right.
He didn't just talk about issues, he brought them to life. He made them resonate on a deeper level.
It's like the difference between reading a dry textbook
Yes,
and getting lost in a good novel.
exactly. And I think that's a lesson we can all apply to our own communication.
Oh, yeah.
Whether we're writing an email, giving a presentation, or just having a conversation.
Right.
The words we choose can make all the difference.
So it's not just what we say, but it's how we say it.
Absolutely.
Okay, good to know. What about repetition? Isn't there that saying, repeat a lie often enough and it becomes the truth?
Oh, yeah.
Is there any truth to that?
Well, it's not quite that simple,
Okay.
but repetition can definitely make a message more believable,
Right.
even if it's not entirely true.
It's like those advertising jingles that get stuck in your head.
Yes.
Or those political slogans we hear over and over again.
Exactly. The more we're exposed to a message, the more familiar it becomes.
Mm-hmm.
And that familiarity can breed a sense of believability.
Right.
It's almost like our brains are saying, well, I've heard this so many times, it must be true.
So it's not just about consciously processing the message.
Right.
It's about that unconscious sense of familiarity
Yes.
that builds up over time.
That's right.
It's a little creepy when you think about it.
It is a bit, yeah.
Like our brains are being subtly reprogrammed without us even realizing it.
That's a good way to put it.
I guess the lesson here is to be extra vigilant when we hear the same message repeated over and over again.
Yeah.
Just because it's familiar doesn't make it true.
Absolutely. Critical thinking is essential, no matter how many times we've heard something before.
Well, this has been an incredible deep dive.
It has.
We've covered so much ground
We have.
from those everyday persuasion tactics that
Ah.
we encounter all the time
Yes.
to like the dark side of propaganda and manipulation.
It's everywhere.
It's everywhere. And it's like we've been on this crash course in understanding how our minds work
Yes.
and how those processes can be influenced both ethically and unethically.
It's been a fascinating journey.
It really has.
And it underscores, I think, the importance of being informed, aware, and engaged in the world around us.
Yeah.
Persuasion is everywhere, but the more we understand it, the better equipped we are to navigate it.
Absolutely. It's about becoming more critical thinkers, more discerning consumers of information,
Yes.
and ultimately more empowered individuals.
I agree.
So to wrap things up, what's one key takeaway you would leave our listener with?
I think Perhaps the best defense against propaganda is to remember that we can be the ones asking the questions,
Okay.
not just accepting the answers we're given,
I love that.
you know?
It's about taking control of our own minds.
Yes.
And making sure our choices are truly our own.
Absolutely.
What are some examples of persuasion that you've encountered in your own life?
Yeah.
What tactics did they use?
Good question.
And were they ethical?
Mm.
That's something to ponder,
Yes.
as you navigate this ever-present world of persuasive communication.
Until next time.
Until next time.
Stay curious, stay skeptical,
Yes.
and keep those critical thinking skills sharp.
And remember, knowledge is power.
It is.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.